Okay. Moving on to the, before we move on, I just want to thank Dr. Rosmarin so much for such an insightful, fantastic, really informative talk. And I think we all learned so much from it. And we're so grateful that he came here to give it to us. Our next speaker for the evening is Rabbi Shapiro, who probably doesn't need an introduction for anybody. Everyone heard of him. He speaks nationwide, and he speaks worldwide, and he has a tremendous following of inspiration. Actually, Rabbi Shapiro came to speak for Madraigos a few years back, and we still remember his how we were all shaken and uplifted from the insight and the chizuk that he gave us. Rabbi Shapiro, since 1998, has been the Rav of Congregation Shaaray Tefila in North Miami Beach, and there he gives the Rav of the Mord Asra of that community. And here in our community, we're very fortunate that he came and will be machazik us this evening. Rabbi Shapiro.
I don't know what he wants to do with it. What is it? You have to answer what he wants to do with it. I don't mean you have to, I mean that I will. I'm not what does he want me to do with it? I'm not holding it. What do you want me to do with it? You're not the guy? I don't need a mic. I don't think so.
You can go right here.
I tried.
Just leave it on the door.
As was mentioned earlier, it's so inspiring that many hundreds of men and women came out. On any given night, there are so many things that a person needs to do. There might be that conflict of juggling priorities. And so, as was mentioned earlier, the fact that a few hundred people came out, as I said, both men and women, is a tremendous source of chizuk to us. And just for your coming out in and of itself, may the Ribbono Shel Olam repay each and every one of you to be able to experience only Yiddish nachas from yourselves, from your entire family. Enjoy it from and together with each other, gesundheit. There's no question about it tonight, our achsanya, which means our host, who brought us together tonight is the organization Madraigos. And of course, I want to single out Rabbi Silver. Hashem should grant Rabbi Silver and all those who so tirelessly work on behalf of Madraigos that they have the koyach, the strength and the chokhmah, the wisdom to continue serving both here and in other places and helping so many in Klal Yisrael. And I, as was done earlier, want to single out Mrs. Mindi Werblowsky. I only met her tonight. We had spoken on the phone, I'm sure you did as well, multiple times, countless times. Her attention to detail is impeccable, leaving no stone unturned, making sure that everything is taken care of, crossing her T's and dotting the I's. I was extraordinarily impressed and inspired by her dedication. And before beginning, I want to say what a privilege it is. I only met Dr. Rosmarin tonight. It was such a schus and such a privilege for me. As soon as he finished, I just wanted to jump up and tell him how outstanding his talk was on every level. Informative, insightful, humorous, And to me, the most impressive thing was he gave it over with a phenomenal humility, a beautiful anivus that I was captivated by. There are a lot of reasons that I knew he spoke so outstandingly well. Probably the two biggest were, in middle he asked, do I have more time to continue? And a few women yelled out, lots and lots more time. I can't remember saying that's happened to me. So, ashrecha, ashrecha, ashrecha. On a more serious note, this to me meant the world. I obviously had prepared the talk. The points I'd like to touch upon from a Torah perspective, quoting Chazal and Maisa stories. It was a great sense of sipuk and satisfaction to me as I was able to, on my paper, literally mark and check off that I heard every single point being said by the good doctor, accentuated again and again. That means Chazdei Hashem, that what we'll be saying tonight is Be'ezras Hashem true and helpful. But I literally found every moment he made another comment or another observation, and I looked at my paper and said, yeah, I have that down. And that must have happened dozens of times. Usually that would upset the second speaker. But in this case, I want to try to quote some things from Chazal and the Torah to help us. The topic Madraigos gave us tonight is managing anxiety. Now, they mean that on two levels. The parents' anxiety and helping your children with their anxiety. I think if you listen tonight, we're going to cover both, the parents and the child's. You have to listen to the talk beginning to end, A to Z, Aleph to Taf, and hopefully by the end it will come full circle. The two anxieties that I want to address, as we said a moment ago, and what we could practically do, I almost find myself wanting to say, as the doctor said, but I can get it out of the way now because I'd probably say that a couple hundred times. It's based on the Haftarah that we read 2 Shabbos ago. We have to do a quick elevator pitch on the Haftarah. Let's go through it quickly. If you have to understand the basic of the Haftarah to appreciate anything we're going to say tonight. So here's the elevator pitch. Haftarah, Parshas Vayera. Elisha and Gehazi are treated with tremendous hospitality from the Isha Shunamis. She makes them a fabulous attic upstairs. They end up blessing her. At that point, she had not yet been blessed with children to have a child. Indeed, she did. As the child was a little boy and began growing up, he complained his head was hurting. She placed the child on the bed upstairs. The room she made for them, the child passed away, a young boy. She runs after Elisha. She tells him what happened. Elisha comes back, and he goes upstairs, and he does revive the child. It's almost impossible to read that Haftarah, and specifically that pasuk, and not have the emotion to cry. Specifically, what it says he did was Vayiskar Hadeles Bad Shneim. He first shut the door. Vayispalel El Hashem. He davened to Hashem. Vayosem Piv al Piv, Einav al Einav, Kapav al Kapav. We call that in the vernacular CPR. Eye on eye, mouth on mouth, palm on palm. Vayochem Besar Hayoled. The flesh became warm and the child woke up. And by the way, I don't know, I guess for doubles and desserts, who, according to almost all, was that child? Nobody. I'm sure everybody knows, they just don't want doubles and desserts. According to men, I can't say everyone, according to most, that child was Habakkuk. And if you learn the life of Habakkuk, so much can be explained with what I just told you, that's who that child became. Reb Meir Shapiro, the founder of the Daf HaYomi and the Rosh Hashiva of Lublin, tells us that if we want to connect with someone, a child or anyone, and revive them spiritually, follow the same steps that Elisha did to revive that child when he was physically dead. Now, Reb Meir Shapiro says some of the ones we're mentioning, and the others I understood from what he said. Follow the journey. It's the entire talk. What did Elisha do to revive that person physically? Says Reb Meir Shapiro, follow the recipe, use the same ingredients, follow the same steps meticulously, and connect and revive someone spiritually. And as we start the journey, I'll show you how that will help with both the parent's anxiety and the child's. What was the first thing that Elisha did, if anybody remembers from all the steps? The first one he did, number one, Vayiskar hadeles ba'ad shnehem. And if you're making notes or you're writing on the blackboard of your heart, put this under the column of helping the child with the child's anxiety, fears, worries, depression. Vayiskar hadeles ba'ad shnehem. Says Reb Meir Shapiro, what that means is when you're talking to your child, shut the door. And I'm sure the doctor would agree, and professionals will tell us, it is the single most important thing. Your child is talking to you. He or she, that teenager or that tween, is expressing to you their anxieties, their fears. They may not express it and say that's what this is. They may couch their words differently. It may come out that they're telling you who's bullying them. But they're talking to you. Fathers and mothers, I, you, we, and us. Shut the door. Don't ever let a child think, God forbid, that your text or your email or your phone call or your business deal is more important than they are. Just shut the door. Your child, your most precious gift in the world, is sharing with you their fears, their anxieties, what depresses them, what worries them. Are you listening? Nebuch, that story about the child came home with anxiety and with fears and wanted the time of the father, but the father was in the middle of some business deal, so he very forcefully tells him he doesn't have time. The child runs to the room, but he does stay long enough to ask the father how much money he makes an hour, and the father says $50 an hour. The kid runs to the room, he's crying. The father did feel badly that he behaved that way. He goes up the steps and he sees the child crying on the bed, counting his money, coins and dollars. He said, "What are you doing?" And the Yingala says, "I just want to see if I have $25. I want to buy half an hour of your time." Vayiskar hadeles ba'ad shnehem. Shut the door. If you are so blessed that your child feels an open line of communication, which we'll get to later, that they feel comfortable enough to come to father or to come to mother, don't let them think at that moment that there's anything that's competing for their time or love. They're talking to you about their anxiety and about their worries, and they're turning to you as the parent for help. Shut the door. I learned this about 15 years ago when Reb Shmuel Dishon, one of our Gedolim, soll gesund und stark sein. I was with him together for Shabbos in Atlanta, and on Motzei Shabbos he spoke. And he said over a story. When I say the story till today, I literally still feel it. As part of his magnificent speech on Motzei Shabbos, he said the following Maisa. He was in his home in Borough Park in his apartment, and he was visited by a friend that had known him since teens, over 60 years. I'm actually embarrassed to tell you the next part of the story. The friend must have mentioned a real estate term, binder or portfolio, and Reb Shmuel Dishon didn't know what it was. So he asked the friend, and the friend must have said something like, Shmuel, what a fool. You don't know a basic real estate term. You know, that's why you're still sitting here in Borough Park, same house, 60 years. But this fellow had places in Florida, Colorado, and all over the place. What a fool, you don't know a basic term. A few minutes later, Reb Shmuel Dishon asked this man, his friend, his childhood friend, I remember that just a few years ago you had your Ben Zekunim. He's 9 years old now, Maishala. Tell me, how is he? He's doing wonderfully. Well, if he's 9, so he probably started now Mishnayos. Which Mishnayos is your Maishala learning? He's learning, I think, but I'm just not sure. How did Maishala do on his Chumash test last week? Well, I imagine I just don't know. Who are his 2 closest friends? Is anybody bullying him? Are there different teachers or things that teachers do that make him unusually anxious and cause him anxiety? And he asked him question after question, and the friend couldn't answer it. And Reb Shmuel Dishon turned and said, and I'm the fool? You send your child your most precious gift from Hashem. Every day on a bus to yeshiva, and you can't tell me anything about him. Now who's the fool? I flew home the next day, and I was so shaken by that story. In fact, by supper on Sunday night, we were all around the table, and my wife left the room for a minute. I quickly turned to my children and said, I have a bunch of questions to ask you. Don't ask me why. I want to make sure this is your favorite teacher. Here's how you did on the test, and nothing's bothering you. Please, if your child is turning to you, or you approach your child, I beg you who are listening, both here and wherever you might hear this talk, please shut the door. In fact, just before moving on to the next step, I'd like to just tell you a 1-minute thought. And the doctor brought this out so beautifully. Of the 10 Makkos, putting the 10th one, the Makas B'chayros, aside, that's in a league by itself, hence it has a title, Makas B'chayros. Of the first 9, which was the worst? Chazal tell us, Choshech, darkness. Reb Shapsi Yudalevich, who was a famous Gadol, Tzaddik, and Maggid in Yerushalayim. I was privileged to know him when I lived in Eretz Yisrael. I lived near him, and very often on Sorotzkin I would go, that's the Rachov, I would go to his home for Havdalah. He says, in his inimitable style, why is Choshech the worst? In the earlier Makkos, the Mitzrayim lost much larger number of human and animal life. Why, pray tell, is Choshech the worst? So he used to answer, and you should open up your hearts. If you open up your hearts, open it now. Let these words sear and pierce your heart and soul. He would answer, you're right, the Mitzrayim lost more humans and animals in the earlier plagues. But by Choshech it says, Lo yira'u ish esochiv v'lo yikamu ish mitachtav, which literally means that they were alone. You see, in the earlier plagues, no matter what they lost, they had each other. They had a shoulder to cry on. They had somebody to wipe away a tear, someone to commiserate with them. But in Chayshech, they were alone. And there is no feeling more miserable than when you think you're going through something alone. People will tell Rabbonim all the time, I can handle X, Y, or Z. My tolerance level is very, very high. But I can't handle being made to feel that I'm alone. You and I, we and us, don't let our children ever, and I mean ever, feel that they are alone. Because that's Chayshech. Let's take it to the next step and talk about helping the parent themselves with anxiety. As you heard earlier, the doctor spelled out so beautifully. Today we shouldn't be that anxious or worried. We have this and we have that. We've been on a plane, we've been to a doctor. You see that I listened well. And yet, the statistics of that many people, a large percentage taking pills, the staggering numbers, what's going on? So for the next level, I'd like to address the parent. What might be able to be done for their fears, their worries, their anxiety? What was the second thing that Elisha did after he shut the door? The second thing was Vayispalel el Hashem. If I didn't have a flight tomorrow morning, I would talk about this Nakuda for days on end. You know why? Because I need to hear it. I'll say it a little louder for the few hundred who have gathered here in the White Shul. I need to hear it. Vayispalel el Hashem. What happens when a person creates that connection with God? They say over the story that Herschel was the most worried human being in the world. I don't know that even the doctor ever met somebody with such a high level of anxiety. And one day his chevra sees he's calm and cool like a cucumber, and they go over and say, Herschel, where's the worry? Where's the fear? Where's the anxiety? He said, I saw an ad in the paper. It says you could pay a guy $500 a week, and he worries for you. I'm free as a bee. They looked at him and said, Herschel, you don't have money. Where are you going to get money to pay him? He says, my worry? That's his worry. The most important thing that I, as a parent, and you who are listening, when it comes to our fear and our worries and our anxiety, you know the famous quote, stop telling Hashem how big your problems are and start telling your problems, do you know how big Hashem is? There's a reason that Tefila is as important as it is. It's our connection to the Ribbono Shel Olam. And if we feel that anxiety and that worry, we turn to Hashem. Hashlech al Hashem Yehovcha. Throw the package to the Ribbono Shel Olam and say, I need help. It's interesting. When the doctor mentioned how many people are taking such a potpourri of pills adding up to a staggering number of dollars, I remembered something I heard about 20 years ago from an uncle of mine. You ever notice that every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the beginning Shemona Esreis all start with the word uvechein tein tachtecha, uvechein tein emascha. Now if you think about it, that literally means, Hashem, grant me fear, grant me worry. It's almost like we're asking for everything when the rest of the world is running away from it and buying pills for it. And we Jews are saying, I'll take a martini, a whole potpourri. Give me a little pachad, give me a little ema, give me a little yira. It's a great kasha. The answer is what we just spoke out 2 minutes ago. If we would learn to channel our ema, our pachad, and our yira to connect with Hashem, that in and of itself is the single biggest step to helping us with our worries and our anxieties. And so the reason that we spend so much time saying, grant me ema, the rest of the world's running from it and I'm asking for it. Yes, because if I have ema and pachad and yira and connect with Hashem, then be'ezras Hashem, the other worries and anxieties, of course it's siyata d'shmaya, but will fall away. Something that was said earlier reminded me of the famous story. It was just said so beautifully. A man is on top of that very precarious cliff. And unfortunately, not like the fellow on the Golden Gate Bridge who was so successful. But this fellow on top made a bad turn and he started to plummet hundreds of feet to his death. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the fall, jutting out from the mountain was a large branch. He grabs it with all his might, and yes, he's still a few hundred feet dangling in the air, but it saved his life and broke his fall. As he breathes the first sigh of relief, all of a sudden, it starts to crack a little bit. So what do you think his first words are? Ribbono shel olam, save me. I'll do anything. It starts to crack a little bit more like a box of toothpicks. And now he calls out mimamakim from the depths of his heart, save me, I'll do anything. Naturally, he's expecting that means I will keep Shabbos better. I won't daven 3 times a day. I'll daven 23 times a day. I'll keep Shabbos 3 times a week. I'll do anything. And as the branch is about to splinter and break off, and he's going to plummet to his certain imminent death, he hears that Paschal who says, if I save you, you'll do anything? He says, anything. The heavenly voice says, fine. What I want you to do is let go of the branch. If you let go of the branch, then I'll save you. I'm going to ask you to go home and do an exercise. I've done it from time to time, and it's delicious and magnificent. When's the last time that you and you and you and you really let go of the branch? This all ties into what the doctor said so beautifully about our need to be in control. And when we're not in control, we worry, and we're in control. When is the last time? And by the way, when you think of that situation, it is the most beautiful internal feeling in the world. Let go of the branch. But really, really, really let go of the branch. When you let go of the branch, that means you realize that I am not in control. And I am putting myself, Hashem, in your hands and your hands alone. I will daven to you. I will connect with you. I will tell my problems how great you are. I will throw my worries towards you. There was somebody who was in a car. A Rebbe got in a car and he saw that in the passenger seat there was like this little Fisher-Price steering wheel, on his passenger side. He says to the Nahag, what's this? The little Fisher-Price beep, beep thing. So the Nahag says, when I'm a driver, when my 7-year-old comes in the car, he sits in the passenger seat, 8-year-old, and he goes like this with the little wheel. He wants to feel like he's in control. So he turns to the driver and says, and you, Nahag, with the big wheel, you think you're in control? We are not in control. Letting go of the branch has the potential to be one of the most therapeutic feelings in the world. Believe me. Go home tonight and ask yourself, when is the last time you truly, truly let go of the branch? I'm not in control. I daven to Hashem. I throw my package to Him. I need siyata d'shmaya. I will shed a tear. I'll do it by lichtbenchen, by candle lighting. Hashem, please help me with my child, with my son, with my daughter, with what I need. Just help me. In fact, it's a great thing to do if for no other reason, and this will lead us into the next part. Do you in the house speak openly about emunah, about bitachon? Somebody recently told me the 3 words in Hallel, hemanti ki adaber, could also be read as hemanti. If you want the family to have emunah, ki adaber, then talk about it. And since I heard that vort, I've tried that in the family. Talk about emunah. Talk about bitachon. Talk about the fact that we have no one on whom to rely other than the Ribbono Shel Olam. And so maybe to help the parent, me, with my anxiety and my worries, and the things that are on my mind, I better leave here tonight remembering I will tell my problems. Do you know how big Hashem is? I will be willing to do a better job of really letting go of the branch. And certainly turning to the Ribbono Shel Olam and realizing that we have to daven so that Be'ezras Hashem we can be helped. Now let's move on to the next thing. I'll actually at this point take the next 3 things and put them together. I'm sure the next 3 you remember. Vayasem, piv al piv, einav al einav, kapav al kapav. We called that CPR, eye on eye, mouth on mouth, hand on hand. Maybe in our managing anxiety, this is the next critical step. And again, as I've said already a dozen times tonight, I was so happy to hear Dr. Rosmarin say it. It was just so sweet. I guess until now you would say in the Vayiskar Hadelas Bad Shneim, that's to help my child with their anxiety. In the Vayispalel El Hashem, it's to help the parent with our anxiety. And now what's the next step? What are we going to do with piv al piv, einav al einav, kapav al kapav? Again, it was something that was touched upon so beautifully. I guess the pull quote is, my children are watching me, and they want to see how tati or mami, abba or ima, dad or mom, handles that situation. How do you handle it? Do you at least try to handle it with a calm? I'm not obviously talking about anxiety or things that have to be treated on the severe level you heard at the end. Things that you could be more capable of working on and controlling, at least trying. The kids are watching. Oh, are they learning? I remember that my wife told me she met a woman from Hollywood, Florida. The woman's no longer alive, so I wouldn't say her name anyway, but the woman told my wife that years ago to go on the Miami Metro bus, I'm from Miami, to go on the Miami Metro bus, you had to pay when you were 5 and older. Her son was 5 and a few months, but she didn't want to pay a second fare, so she told her kid, tell the driver you're 4. They get on the bus, she pays once, so the driver says to the kid, how old are you? He says, I'm 4 years old. The driver looks at the kid and says, when are you going to be 5? He says, the second I get off the bus. And I want to tell you, you might tell me, yeah, I read that story. This is a true story. Maisa Shaya Kachoya. I obviously won't tell you who it happened with. Your kid is watching. What type of parenting is that? A few years ago, I heard the flip side of the same coin. One of the people at our shul in North Miami Beach went to Eretz Yisrael to visit his relatives. He gets there on a Monday and he sees his little cousins are playing Monopoly with friends. The night ends, but the game didn't. He sees the rest of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're still playing Monopoly, the same game. He's so exasperated. Monopoly, Monopoly. You get rid of the hotels, you lose the money, you lost the game. So he goes over to his cousins Thursday night and says, you've been playing the same game of Monopoly all week. How could it be it didn't end 20 times? You lose the money, you lose the hotels, you lost, you're over. So the 8-year-old girl looks at her cousin from America and says, no, in our game of Monopoly, we started a gemach. They started a gemach. Maisa shehaya kach haya. Ashreichem to that family in Eretz Yisrael. Here's a shout out to you. Let your family know instinctively and intuitively that Monopoly is with the gemach. In other words, you want children who are 5 when they get off the bus, or to know that Monopoly is built in with the gemach. Now, there are no guarantees, and we need Tefila. I get that. But let's at least try where we can. After learning the importance, and you heard a beautiful list of the early stages of what someone could do to help themselves, I followed all the steps. There were a lot of steps in the early part that the doctor mentioned of what you and we could do to help ourselves. Do it because the kinderlach are watching. And instinctively and intuitively, they're learning. Einav al einav, they're looking to see what you're doing. Piv al piv, they're watching to see how you speak. Kapav al kapav, hand on hand, how do you handle situations? They're watching. They're watching to see from the parent. They're watching, they're listening, they're looking, they're seeing. They want to know how you handle situations. Where we can help ourselves, we must, because our children are watching. And before moving on to the final part, just to make one point about the children, something that maybe it's the more that I'm privileged to be in the Rabbanis, the more I realize that the next thing, I don't know if it's the deal breaker, but it's pretty close to the deal breaker. We've got to make our home a place that's safe. We've got to make our home a place that is fun, that is enjoyable, that is Toradic, that my son and my daughter, my married child and my einikel, my 11-year-old and my 4-year-old, they feel comfortable. They feel safe. They feel it's geschmack. They feel it's enjoyable. They feel it's Toradic. That goes a long way to removing and managing anxiety and fears and worries and depressions. And the longer that I have the schus to be in the Rabbanis, I see it is close to the game changer. We've got to make our home a place where the proper values are just bouncing off the walls. I want my children to feel it's a safe, enjoyable, comfortable, geschmack, Toradic environment. As critical as you think that point is, times it by who knows how much. Because they're watching. And so before I go to the final point, I'll just emphasize this with a story, the way I heard it many times. About 100 years ago, there was a 7-year-old boy. He comes home one day on a Tuesday, and he tells his mother in the afternoon, Ma, I finished part of Mishnayos. She stops and looks at him and says, you what? I finished the chelik of Mishnayos. What? You wait here. She runs to her room and puts on her big day Shabbos. The husband puts on his big day Shabbos. She sets the table Yom Tifte, like a Suda Shleima HaMelech B'Shaitai. They put the 7-year-old on their shoulders. And they're dancing and dancing. Mo ahavti sayrasecha kol hayom hisichosi. The 7-year-old had a brilliant mind. That was at the time of the Enlightenment that wanted those genius children. But seeing and feeling and sensing and knowing and touching the home of his parents and what they valued, he knew there was only one thing for him, a life of Torah. The world is grateful to his mother, for that 7-year-old's name was Yitzchak Hutner, who went on to become one of our Gedolei Yisrael and the Rosh Hashiva of Chaim Berlin. Thank you to Mrs. Hutner. What would have been if it would have ended differently? He comes home. Forgive me if it's a bit dramatic. And he puts down his Mishnayos, and the mother would say, don't put it down over there. Last time you put it down over there, it knocked over the chocolate milk. I Windex for 20 minutes. Put it somewhere else. You finish something, you'll tell me tonight. After the carpool, I'm going to finish the bath. I'll do the Hamal Chagoyel. We'll read the book. I'll fall asleep in the book. Then you'll tell me about the Mishnayos thing. The home better be a safe, enjoyable, fun gishmak with Torah bouncing off the walls. That's the whole enchilada. And finally, anybody remember when we started 38 minutes ago what the last step? I did that to let you know how long I've been speaking. Anybody know when we started what was the last of the 6 steps? Vayiskar hadeles bad shneihem, shut the door. That's the parent to help the child with theirs. Vayispal el Hashem, that's the parent to help themselves. Piv al piv, einav al einav, kapav al kapav, is to help everyone because they're watching, they're listening, they're looking, they're talking. What's the last thing? Vayacham bisar hayoled literally means the child's flesh became warm. To conclude tonight, I think what it means is warm the flesh of your child, because there is nothing, but nothing, and I mean nothing, to help us and them confront their anxiety and their fears, that we could do better than make them feel the love and the warmth. There's a famous quote I try to live by. I don't care how much you know. I want to know how much you care. Vayacham Bisar Hayoled will leave here tonight. Be'ezras Hashem, letting our families and our children know the warmth and the love, the intense and passionate chamimus. And hopefully that will go a long way to make the fears, the worries, the anxiety, hopefully melt away. So I want to end with a story. What happens when you show someone that chamimus, that love, and that unparalleled, ginormous warmth? A number of years ago, there was a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. A boy was learning, and he had a question on the Gemara. His Rebbe said, it's a good shaila, go to the library, see if anybody asks your question. He found a sefer that asked and answered his question, but he didn't like the answer. So the Rebbe says, it says in the opening page who the mechaber, the author, is. It gives you an address. Go on a bus, and the beauty, right? Such a beautiful thing a Rebbe suggests. And tell the mechaber, the author, that you argue with his answer. He sees the mechaber's name is someone named Yosef. At a particular address, he takes a bus, he has the sefer, he rings the bell, and an elderly woman answers. And he says to the elderly woman, is Yosef here? And she says, he hasn't lived here for 10 years. I'll give you his new address. The boy takes the new address. It's a bus ride away. He jumps off the bus, rings the bell of the new address, safer under his hand, and the door opens. And the man standing who opened the door had long hair. So many multiple body piercings, they would have had trouble in TSA. Tattoos off the kazoo, and tie-dyed clothing. And I didn't embellish it. The Bucher looks at him and says, "You're Yosef?" He says, "Yeah." "The one who wrote the Sefer?" "Yeah." The kid didn't know how to run away quick enough for her to cry. He says, "What do you want?" He gets the words out. I had a kash on what you wrote, and I don't agree with your answer. You don't agree with my answer? He runs and he gets a yarmulke. He listens to what the boy doesn't like, and then Yosef becomes the lion that he was, the Ari, the lion from 15 years earlier. And he starts defending his answer like his life depended on it. I'll explain the Rashba. I'll explain the Ritva. I'll explain the Tzais. I'll explain the Mishnah Shabbarim. But I feel that I'm right, and he defended, and he defended, and he defended like his life depended. The oxygen was his Torah. Torah was his oxygen. Parenthetically, he did tell the boy what happened to him and why he went off and what became. Yosef is staring. The man starts to cry and says, "Do you have my sefer?" And the boy says, "I have a copy right here." He says, "I don't have a copy. Can I have it?" And he gives it to him. The next day, Yosef is in yeshiva. He tells his Rebbe what happened. The Bucher was in yeshiva. He tells his Rebbe what happened. The Rebbe says, "That first address, the elderly woman, it's obviously the mother. Go call her and tell her what happened." So he ran to a payphone. I know it's hard to believe there used to be something so archaic. It'll be very fashionable soon. You won't lose it. It remains on the wall, and the battery won't run out. It'll be a hot item in a couple years. But that's for another schmooze. He runs to the payphone. He calls, and the elderly woman answers, and he says, "I'm the one who was by you yesterday." And then she says, "Stop! You listen to me. I don't know who you are. I don't know your name. But I want to tell you something. Yosef is my son. He hasn't lived in our home for 10 years, and we haven't spoken for 10 years. But after your visit, he called me and said, 'Ma, I'm coming home. And my Yosef is going to be home in 10 minutes. So I wanted to thank you. Because when you let someone know that you care, when you show them the deepest, and I mean deepest, chamimus, love and warmth, then be'ezras Hashem, be'ezras Hashem, be'ezras Hashem, everything else melts away until Yosef calls his mother and says, "Ma, I'm coming home." May we merit for ourselves and for our children and for all of Klal Yisrael that all of our tefillas are answered, specifically tonight with the managing of anxiety and fear and worry and depression for us and for our children, and we try to implement the different things that we mentioned. After the Vayiskar Hadelas Bad Shneim, and after the Vayispalel Hashem, and after the Piv al Piv, Einav al Einav, Kapav al Kapav, remember, Vayocham Bisar Hayolad. Let's show each other, let's show our children, let's show ourselves the warmth, the love, and the passion that we should be able to enjoy our lives. Gesundheit.